Today we're going to cover toxic mold, what are mycotoxins, the health effects, which is Keely's going to step in and present a little bit about this information and her experience. How do mycotoxins become airborne? How do we test for it, the testing process? And then Randy's going to get back into the remediation process. Why should you or your company really be concerned about mycotoxins? Well, I really believe that the industry is going to experience a dramatic shift in how mold remediation is performed. The reason for this is because of the 6 years of research from 21st Global and Rob and Sue Goldsworthy. The previous research out there showed that the amount of mycotoxins produced from mold in the indoor environment was really not sufficient in quantity to adverse the individual's health. That was the general thinking in the industry. That is what I believe. But I'm going to tell you, boy, did we get it wrong. The reason we got it wrong is because at that time, there was no viable airborne testing method. So we didn't even know to test for it. We didn't know it was a problem. But today we can reliably test indoor air for mycotoxins. And I'm going to tell you, we got a problem, but we also have an opportunity to help people that are in these environments and it's making them sick. There are about 45 million buildings estimated to have mold issues in the United States. These hazardous mycotoxins are likely to be present within these indoor air, causing adverse health effects. Millions of Americans are suffering from mold toxicity as a result of mycotoxin poisoning in their homes and buildings. And few companies are really performing proper airborne mycotoxin testing and remediation. And we'll go into the reasons why that is, but mostly it's because the industry itself is really not aware of the mycotoxin issue. Many of you may be familiar with NORMI. NORMI is the National Organization for Remediators and Mold Inspectors. The industry itself is really starting to understand that there's an issue with mycotoxins in the indoor environment caused from molds. NORMI is starting to do a lot of research, testing. They're starting to put together some protocols for remediators on proper remediation of mycotoxins. And later on this year, they're hoping to come out with a level 5 certification on how to remove mycotoxins from the indoor environment. So the industry is aware of the issue. They're just now working on putting the protocols together. And they're using the EMEA mycotoxin airborne test to put those protocols together, because now they have a reliable method to determine whether or not after the remediation, there's still elevated mycotoxin levels. As I said earlier, people are suffering from mycotoxin, mold toxicity. Consumers out there are requesting urine and blood tests to check for elevated mycotoxin levels. We get those reports in, we're looking at them, we're seeing, what is actually causing it. People that are buying homes or homeowners, they want to know if their home is safe because they have some mold sensitivities. Is that house I'm moving into safe? Well, previously all we had for testing that was maybe a spore trap testing. Well, spores, if you understand, is really an allergen compared to mycotoxins, which is a much more severe health issue. I think you really need to look at it this way. Mold remediation will not remove mycotoxins, but mycotoxin remediation will remove the mold. So when you look at it, we really need to start looking at removing the mycotoxins, because that's going to remove also the mold and make sure that everything's protected. Black toxic mold. I mean, your customers know what black toxic mold is. They've heard that term, black toxic mold, forever. I don't know how many times I've gone into or got a call or a picture from a homeowner. Maybe there's a little bit of mold on their windowsill, or maybe a little bit of mold spotting in their bathroom. And they'd be always asking, is that the black toxic mold? And they understand what that is. That toxic portion, that's mycotoxins. That's what we're referring to. Now, the industry always looked at toxic mold. They're referring to a specific species of mold, that's Stachybotrys. But we now know that multiple mold species can produce mycotoxins, and multiple mold species can produce more than one mycotoxin. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But for decades, the restoration industry used black toxic mold as really a scare tactic. It hasn't been used as much in the last 10 years, but it was really used as a scare tactic to get people to perform remediation. Guess what? They were actually right, but for the wrong reason. Black toxic mold is out there. Mycotoxins are in the environment, and it can cause some really severe health effects. But what are they? Mycotoxins are simply a natural defense mechanism produced by molds to protect itself from other molds and fungi that are competing for resources necessary for its survival. So if you have multiple molds on a wall, they're going to release this toxic poison, this chemical, to basically kill off the other molds. That's what mycotoxins are doing. And if one mycotoxin that they're producing isn't getting the job done, that mold will now produce a different type of mycotoxin that may be more effective in getting rid of the competing fungi or molds. Lastly, understand that mycotoxins are a chemical. So they're a poison chemical. You can't kill mycotoxins. They need to be removed from the environment. A little bit about how mycotoxins become airborne. If you understand how they become airborne, then you'll kind of understand where the remediation needs to go. And Randy's going to talk about that down the road. But basically, mycotoxins are aerosolized via evaporation. Mycotoxins are hydrophobic in most cases, meaning that they rest on top of the water. The mycotoxins are then aerosolized via the evaporation of the water. So when we're drying out buildings, we're actually removing and evaporating that moisture, which is actually releasing the mycotoxins up into the air. So we're actually increasing the mycotoxin levels through the dry out process. The other thing you need to understand is that mycotoxins are 0.1 micron in size. Now, we all know that our HEPA air scrubbers will filter down to 0.3 microns, but what happens to mycotoxins when they go through a HEPA scrubber, and the research shows this, is that the mold spores or the dust particulates, if they have any mycotoxins on them, when they impact that filter, the mycotoxins are scrubbed off the spore and the dust. The spores and the dust are captured, the mycotoxins are scrubbed off from the impactation to the filter, and they're released back up into the air. So running HEPA air scrubbers, we've tested it, actually is increasing the level of mycotoxins into the air. Now, we've tried commercial, medical grade, activated carbon filters, and still the mycotoxin levels were increasing. So again, HEPA scrubbers, even with carbon filters, haven't been successful in removing the mycotoxins from the air. And again, Randy will get into methods that can be removed from the air. Also, natural air movement also plays a role in the aerosolization of the mycotoxins. And lastly, research shows that mycotoxins are actually contained in the cell wall fungi. So in the mold, the cell wall, when we're cleaning surfaces, we're crushing, okay, whether we're using wire brushes or microfiber cloths, we're crushing that cell wall, and that's releasing and spreading the mycotoxins all over the wall, as well as up into the air. So those are the three main ways that the research that 21st Global performed are increasing levels of mycotoxins into the air. We'll talk a little bit about mycotoxins, virtually found where there's mold or where there has been mold, if they're present. So a lot of homes, we did proper remediation. I talked about that one individual, even though we did the proper remediation, we did all the tests, it was still not safe for her to go into that structure because there were elevated levels of mycotoxins. Those mycotoxins are still left behind, even though we've done proper remediation. As I said before, many species of mold can produce more than one type of mycotoxins, and molds can produce more than one type of mycotoxins. So lots of different species can produce it, and they can produce more than one type of mycotoxins. It's also important to understand the difference in health effects. Normally, when we talk about health effects for mold, we talk about mold spores and allergens, but mycotoxins and mold spores and allergens are two different health issues. Mold spores, again, hay fever-like symptoms. It's an allergen. People have allergy-like reactions. Mycotoxins are a chemical poison, so it has a much greater health effect. I'm going to turn it over just for a second to Keely so that she can explain a little bit more about the mycotoxin health effects and her story, and a little bit about exposing mold. So Kelly, if you're ready, I'll turn this over to you. I'm sorry, Keely.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Sue and Rob for reviving the mycotoxin air test. And Rob, thank you for, Mark, thank you for the invitation today. Like Mark indicated in the beginning of the presentation, I have been severely injured by toxic mold exposure, and I am what is known in the industry as a mold hypersensitive. What that means is I have a certain level of immune system injury that will always be re-aggravated by some mycotoxins. My immune system has been exposed to the point where it has been permanently damaged. I don't even have to be in mold. I can be out of mold for a long time and go to a mycotoxin contaminated area and I can feel it. What that feels like for me is anxiety. And so I want to start by explaining people with depression and anxiety. These are very common health effects for exposure to mycotoxins. There's a lot that's not well documented in the research in terms of what mycotoxins can do, but at the bare minimum, they have documented some effects, and it won't all be in one peer-reviewed article. A lot of times it's strung along the internet in 5 or 6 different articles. But what you can find in peer-reviewed literature is that a major pathology of causing depression and anxiety is oxidative stress, and mycotoxin exposure causes oxidative stress. So we can therefore see a link that oxidative stress from mycotoxin exposure can cause depression and anxiety. Now, depression and anxiety are well-known health factors that are validated by Western medicine, but the medicines often don't work because it's environmental. Something that's not well validated by Western medicine is multiple chemical sensitivity. And a lot of times people have exposure to mycotoxins, which are chemicals, and this ultimately can damage the lung lining so that when you're around other chemicals, you're more sensitive to them. As remediators who are in this field, if you suddenly notice that you have an acute acquired sensitivity to bleach or other cleaning products that you didn't have when you entered the industry, that's a sign that could be happening to you. I founded the nonprofit organization Exposing Mold because I realized, as Mark was saying in the beginning of the presentation, that no mold testers or remediators were addressing the mycotoxin issues. And in fact, the industry was set up to misrepresent all these issues for people like me. And what I mean is, it's very easy to not find Stachybotrys on an air test. And if you can't find it, you can't say it's there to fix it. Before I go on with other health effects of mycotoxins, I just want to share with you all, since I'm lucky enough to be in front of a bunch of people who are helping people like me, that the level of sensitivity that we endure once we have this permanent immune system injury is almost unbelievable. And that's why you probably encounter different clients that you're like, is she crazy? Are they crazy? Because that's how sick they are, that it scrambles their brain and causes neurodegeneration, oxidative stress, neuroinflammation. And no one's really telling the truth about the health effects. In kids, especially in schools, this can be really hard because it can make kids more aggressive as a nerve agent, like T2. It can also, just slight levels, it seems to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier and go into the brain at very low doses, which this is not in peer-reviewed literature, but as an observance as a clinician, attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, behavioral problems, rage in kids, food sensitivities, the illnesses, pandas. If you guys have been working in mold forever, you probably have parents with kids with those diagnoses that you've tried to help. These are all atypical presentations of chronic mycotoxin exposure. And it seems like this illness is progressing in severity by getting worse, and I'm going to explain why. Mold is capable of breaking down anything that it's growing on, and mycotoxins are mold's digestive process. So whatever mold eats, it can also poop and fart out. So if 200 years ago it was only eating whatever chemicals were present then, and now it's eating whatever chemicals are present now, there's good case that the toxins that are being produced by mold are ever increasing in virulence by our modern pollution. So never underestimate how awful this illness can be from someone. One thing that we say at Exposing Mold, and this might sound overly generic, but it's fact, it doesn't matter what it is, it gets worse. It doesn't matter if it's arthritis, if it's that pain in your shoulder, if it's your creaky knees, if it's an autoimmune condition, if it's recurrent infections. Exposure to mycotoxins that suppress your immune system will allow any pathogen, bacterial or viral, to completely take over. And this is what I saw with COVID. Everyone who got long COVID that called me for help was in a moldy building. So it causes immune suppression, which then allows a virus and a bacteria to basically take over the body. So recurrent bacterial infections or reactivated viruses is another common presentation. So that's a lot to look out for. But thank you so much for allowing me to share that.
Thanks, Keely. I would all recommend, Keely has a lot of podcasts that she's put together through Exposing Mold. To get a chance, take a chance and look at her website and podcasts, some great information. These are some other diseases that are believed to be related to mycotoxins. So we get a lot of calls as a lab from people that are suffering from potential mycotoxin issues that want testing in their home. And they're really looking to see whether it's the indoor environment that is causing their levels of mycotoxins or something else. They're looking for answers. And now we have an opportunity to give them those answers through testing. It all starts with industry awareness. I mean, the remediation industry really lacks overall awareness. By attending a webinar like this, you're starting to get some exposure to the issue and the dangers of mycotoxins. They're in the indoor environment. They may have high levels of mycotoxins. There are several health effects of mycotoxin poisoning, both for humans and animals. Many current remediation practices actually increase the levels of mycotoxins in the air, but now we have mycotoxin testing, which is available. So we can make sure that these homes are safe for people to reoccupy. So again, being taken a lot more seriously by homeowners. Mycotoxins are, consumers are having a lot more urine and blood tests for mycotoxin levels, and they really want to understand where that exposure is coming from. Is it coming from their home? Is it coming from their work environment? You know, what is making them sick from these levels of mycotoxins? And now the industry is starting to recognize that. We're starting to see organizations like NORMI writing remediation protocols for mycotoxins. So that's where the industry is going. We're becoming more aware, and we're going to be able to do a better job for our consumers. Now, at this time, I really want to introduce AMEA. AMEA stands for Airborne Mycotoxin Environmental Analysis. It's air sampling. It's considered the strongest strategy for the detection of airborne contaminants. For sampling the air you're actually breathing in the breathing zone, that's going to indicate really what's going on in the air versus taking a dust sample on the floor. So we're really looking at, you know, what is that occupant breathing inside that breathing zone. AMEA identifies the most prevalent airborne mycotoxins if present in the indoor environment. We actually test for the mycotoxin chemical. We're not testing for antibodies. We're actually testing for the mycotoxin chemical. And probably the cornerstone of AMEA is the research that 21st Global did for determining normal background levels within our indoor environment. What 21st Global did, Rob and Sue, they tested approximately 1,000 structures. And those 1,000 structures had certain parameters that they were looking for. No history of any kind of mold, no history of water damage, and no history of individuals, the known mold sensitivities. So basically they wanted structures that had no mold, no water damage, no individuals with mold sensitivities. They tested approximately 1,000 of these structures, and they came back with a baseline of background levels of mold toxicity, so mold toxins. So our reports are going to be compared to these background levels. I'll go into that a little bit further, but there has been background testing on this. Now we use what we call an IOM sampler. IOM is from the Institute of Occupational Medicine. It is the gold standard when you're testing or trying to collect for inhalable particles or bioaerosols. We put a microcassette in there, very much like a aerosol cassette. It's to test the air for mycotoxins. AMEA is performed under active sampling, meaning that the air is going to be conditioned to simulate normal air activity. And it's going to be performed for 1 hour at 2 liters a minute. So that's the testing requirement. Now, how does this all go together? In the top corner here, we have what we call our microcassette. The red portion on the outer side is what we call the transfer clip. This is what you're going to send it back into the lab with. The black portion here, it holds the foam filter, and obviously the red cap to seal it all together. So when you have the microcassette, you're going to take off the cap, you're going to take the black foam filter, and you're going to put it into this IOM sampler holder. You're going to attach your hose to the pump, and this is going to be at 5 feet in the air. So if you already have a stand for it, you can use your own stand, or we have some that are recommended. And you're going to run this again at 2 liters a minute for 1 hour. This is all the equipment that's needed. If you already have a pump that has a ability to run at 2 liters for 1 hour, then you probably only need a calibrator, adapter, an IOM sampler, and the Mycocassettes. If you need everything, we'll give you the links to that so that you can purchase the equipment. MEA is basically conducted in a building, home, or other structures. We want to make sure that we're using industry standard air sampling equipment. We didn't invent new equipment. We basically took the best equipment that was out there. Each sample is conducted under active sampling, again, for 2 minutes for 1 hour, 5 feet off the ground. That's the breathing zone. After the 1 hour collection time is over, you're going to place that Mycocassette in a secure transport clip, place it in the plastic bag, and ship it off to the lab. We're going to then use our patented extraction process to prepare the sample, and we're going to use ELISA testing. ELISA testing is the industry standard for testing for mycotoxins. After ELISA test is completed, we'll then put the results into our EMEA report. We'll send it out to you. We like to provide interpretation of the results. It's all produced per cubic meter, parts per billion. And then we're going to report those results against established background levels for indoor mycotoxins. Here's a sample report. As you can see on the sample report, we have the mycotoxin. This is done in the kitchen. And we're kind of highlighting whether it's in the low, medium, or high level, or whether we didn't have any detectable limits. I think what's important to understand is, as Keely's saying, when you have individuals that are already chemically sensitized to mycotoxins, it can be reported in the low levels. And for them, this is too high. And those areas will still need to be remediated. If you do not have a mycotoxin sensitivity, low levels are probably just fine. But for somebody who's already sensitized, these low levels, if it comes back, you're probably going to have to do mycotoxin remediation. This is probably the most important part, and it's really important to understand that there are no levels of inhaled mycotoxins that have been proven safe. Now, we've got background levels, but again, low levels of mycotoxins may be too high for persons with chemical sensitivities, infants, or children. They may have a lower tolerance level to those presence of mycotoxins. So it's really up to the individual remediation company to determine whether at low levels they should be performing mycotoxin remediation. Obviously, at medium or high, those levels are probably going to need remediation. So why use EMEA? Again, we're the only airborne test for mycotoxins in the indoor environment. We're the only one specifically dedicated for testing for those airborne mycotoxins. We are the only company that has results that are measured against established background levels. It's really designed to determine if the property is safe for property owners. Use the test to kind of rule in or rule out the structure as a cause for health complications. We're really making the invisible visible to make the home and building safer. EMEA versus some other environmental tests. Obviously, spore trap testing doesn't test for mycotoxins. ERMI doesn't really test for the actual mycotoxin chemical. EMA is a product out there. Many of you may have heard about it. They test for mycotoxins, but they collect dust samples or settled dust. They're not actually sampling the indoor air.
At this point, yeah, thank you very much. And I can kind of review the information that goes into the protocols a little bit. I've got the slideshow that I'll share with everybody. I don't know. Let's see. Yep, I think we've got most of the questions that have been answered. So I'll go ahead and share my screen at this point. And again, that is Derek over in Pennsylvania. So thank you. Here's the product solution that Rob and Sue Goldsworthy's have come up with. You know, this really tells us, again, we're about the people, the products, and the processes. That's really how we go about doing business on a daily basis. And fortunately, we've been able to have wonderful products that have been created by Rob and Sue Goldsworthy. So appreciate their efforts in this because it's really moving things forward here. So if we can tackle and address the mycotoxin problems, we're going to naturally just take care of the mold problem much easier here. This is the product that is being used in connection with any mycotoxin treatments and cleaning. Really gets down to thorough cleaning, like I mentioned earlier. And this is an organic product. It has little to no VOCs. And so from that standpoint, it's makes it much easier to use in these structures that way, but it's an all-purpose cleaner that is being utilized this way. It's got a high, it's a high alkaline product is what the HA stands for. The dilution rate on this, and it's encouraged to be used with, just mix it with water so that 1 quart makes 5 gallons ready to use, similar like you would with using the GM 6000, the Goldmorr GM 6000 stain remover. But this here, you add it with warm or hot water to mix it up for use. And so here's some of the directions for use, and we'll have this out on our website in our for the Goldmorr members that you can use and reference, and we'll keep adding to it. But I've reviewed this, and this is the information that has come out of Australia with their research and all those homes that they've done testing on and whatnot. As well as Derek, you probably used a combination of things as you were tackling these projects just the same. Always wear PPE, and in this case, the filter that they're suggesting is a P3 mask for the filter there. Contain that location. So if you've identified that you've got mycotoxins in a bedroom, and I think you alluded to this, Derek, right? It's localized. It doesn't float in the air like mold spores do, because we're not dealing with a living organism that way. It's a chemical release, and it's concentrated in wherever that location is that has had experience with water damage or mold problems in that location. So from that standpoint, you would contain that location in that room so that we can go ahead and is everybody, you're able to see my screen okay, correct? Okay. So isolate and contain the affected location, seal it off from the others. Also, the use of dehumidifiers is what's being recommended. It depends on the size of the room, but in that affected room, you'll want to use dehumidifiers in here, and then set up some air movers. Approximately 4 per room is what's being suggested, and direct those air movers towards the dehumidifier. So you want to move all of that air movement around going towards the dehu, or dehumidifiers, multiple if you're dealing with that. They'll turn on the equipment and then remove any visible staining. So let's just say, for example, you've got high humidity in the structure, they had condensation that created the mold on those surfaces. You would treat those surfaces using the GM 6000, or if you're not concerned about the aesthetics of it, the stain itself, you can use 2020 HA also for that. I think you did both in your research, Derek, as well. And then you're going to clean those mold affected surfaces a second time. Let's say you had surface mold on there. You hit it with the GM 6000. You come behind it with the 2020 HA, use a new microfiber cloths on there to clean those surfaces. And then you're going to go around that entire room. If you've located it, let's say, for example, the bedroom, you're going to wipe down all of those unaffected locations with the 2020 HA as well. ceilings, walls, doors, handles, window sills, the flooring, depending on what the flooring is. If it's a hard floor covering, you're going to hit it with the 2020 HA, or if it's a soft furnishing, if it's carpet and whatnot, then you'll pre-spray all of that, or soft furnishings with the 2020 HA if applicable. Then once that is done, you will fog that environment using 2020 HA. A lot of you are accustomed to using Goldmorr GM 2000. In this case, the area that has been affected with the mycotoxins, you can fog with the 2020 HA product. After you fogged it, wipe it down again. So again, this gets down into that detailed, thorough cleaning from top to bottom. So now you're wiping it down another time. And then at the end of that, you're going to fog it again a second time while the dehumidifiers are still running. And at this point, once you've done all of that, you want to keep those dehumidifiers running until you can achieve 55% or less relative humidity in the structure. Once you're able to do that, then you'll be ready for sampling for your post testing with the AMEA testing. For the unaffected locations outside of the source location that has been noted to have mycotoxins, you would proceed like you would any other, is to hit it with the GM 2000 fogging agent, and that'll help to scrub the air clean in those other locations. One of the important notes here was that Sue mentioned here, the use of dehumidifiers is going to help reduce the dwell time. So it helps to eliminate those spores and those other particulates that are floating around there. But at that point, once you're able to achieve the 55% relative humidity or lower, then you can go ahead and do your post-testing. That's it in a nutshell for the most part. So that was the new product that we do have available. There's other products out there, I'm sure, that people are using. This is what's been used and at least has been proven to be effective. So with that, I don't know if Sue, if you had anything else to add to that or not, but again, wanted to share that information with you. And again, I appreciate everybody taking time out of your day to be a part of this. It's exciting. It's new. We're going to learn more and more as time goes on. There's a lot to it. It's very detailed. Every job is different. And I'm sure we're going to learn more in the days and weeks ahead and months and years ahead. So thank you, everybody.